Chuck Schumer, the 8-year Senate Minority Leader of the Democratic Party, faced an unprecedented uprising from within his own party following his disastrous handling of the government shutdown that lasted over 40 days, the longest in U.S. history. But this isn't just about a single political defeat. This is about what happens when the Democratic Party's leadership finds itself fundamentally disconnected from its own base, when critical healthcare protections affecting millions of Americans are abandoned in the name of compromise, and when the party's internal divisions threaten to tear the entire organization apart at the seams. Today, we're going to break down what Schumer's capitulation means for the Democratic Party, why this moment represents an existential crisis in Democratic leadership, and what the future holds for a party rapidly losing the confidence of its own members. Before we go any further, please subscribe to this channel. Just weeks ago, Chuck Schumer stood before the nation with apparently confident rhetoric. As the highest-ranking Democrat in the U.S. Senate and a senator since 1999, Schumer had positioned himself as the guardian of democratic values and the protector of American working families. When negotiations over the government shutdown intensified in late October 2025, Schumer made explicit promises to Democrats. He assured party members that the Affordable Care Act enhanced tax credits, subsidies that help millions of Americans purchase health insurance, would not be sacrificed on the altar of Republican demands. He promised that the Democratic Party would take a hard stand. He told progressives that health care protections would be non-negotiable. Then everything changed. On November 9, 2025, 8 Senate Democrats broke ranks with their leadership and voted to advance a Republican-backed continuing resolution that would reopen the government. These senators cut a deal with Republicans without securing the ACA tax credit extension that Democrats had demanded. The deal included only a promised vote on extending the credits, not an actual extension. It included a promise, not a guarantee. It included hope, not protection. What made this betrayal even more cutting was what happened next. Schumer, who had promised to stand firm, did not prevent the collapse. He could not hold his caucus. And while he technically voted against the bill, reporting revealed that Schumer had been in constant contact with these 8 Democrats, receiving daily updates about their negotiations. He knew what was happening, and he could not stop it. The response from the Democratic base was immediate and visceral. Within hours of the vote, calls for Schumer's resignation emerged not from fringe elements, but from established House Democrats. Representative Rashida Tlaib, a Michigan progressive, posted directly, "The Democratic Party needs leaders who fight and deliver for working people. Schumer should step down." Representative Ro Khanna of California, representing Silicon Valley, wrote on X, "Senator Schumer is no longer effective and should be replaced. If you can't lead the fight to stop healthcare premiums from skyrocketing for Americans, what will you fight for?" The political establishment took notice. David Axelrod, former senior advisor to President Obama, predicted on CNN that Schumer's time as party leader had ended. "My guess is that he won't be leader of the party in 2027 after this election, unless something really surprising happens," Axelrod said. This was not commentary from progressive activists. This was analysis from the establishment itself, concluding that Schumer was finished. What many Americans failed to grasp is the healthcare stakes of what just occurred. The Enhanced Affordable Care Act premium tax credits expire on December 31, 2025, less than 45 days away. These credits, created under the American Rescue Plan in 2021 and extended through the Inflation Reduction Act, have made health insurance affordable for millions of Americans. When these credits expire without renewal, healthcare officials project that individual marketplace premiums will rise by more than 20% on average. For California alone, covered California projects that monthly premiums will increase 97% on average. For nearly 1.7 million Californians enrolled in the state's marketplace, as many as 400,000 Californians could be priced out of healthcare coverage entirely. Nationwide, as many as 5 million Americans could lose their health insurance coverage completely. For millions more, basic health coverage would become unaffordable. This is not hypothetical or theoretical. This is happening within weeks, and Chuck Schumer, who promised Democrats he would protect these healthcare benefits, allowed the party's leverage to collapse without securing them. To understand why this matters so much, we need to examine the broader context of Democratic politics in 2025. The Democratic Party had won significant victories in off-year elections just 1 week before the shutdown deal collapsed. Zohran Mamdani, a 34-year-old Democratic socialist, had become New York City's first Muslim mayor. Democrats had won key races across the country. The party's base was energized and ready to fight. Yet here was the Democratic leadership, breaking the party's unity and surrendering immediately after winning politically. Trump and the Republicans had been blamed for the shutdown. Trump had been flailing, asking for an end to the Senate filibuster. Democrats appeared to be winning the politics of the situation, and yet with no final Democratic victory on healthcare, the party leadership simply gave up. For progressive Democrats who had fought during the 2024 cycle for a more aggressive posture toward Republican extremism, this was the final straw. The 8 Democratic senators who broke ranks were not progressive insurgents. They were not fringe figures. Senator Dick Durbin had served Illinois since 1997 and was a respected senior member of the caucus. Senator Fetterman was a newer member but represented Pennsylvania, a critical swing state. Senators Hassan and Shaheen represented New Hampshire. Senator Caney represented Virginia. These were not radical figures breaking with Democratic orthodoxy. These were moderate Democrats openly rejecting Schumer's approach. The fact that these moderates felt comfortable breaking ranks revealed a profound truth. The party had no leadership. Schumer could not hold his caucus. He could not enforce party discipline. He could not make other Democratic senators feel that standing with their leader mattered. This was a leadership failure of historic proportions. Moreover, the personal dimension of this revolt deserves attention. Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire voted for the shutdown deal. Her own daughter opposed. Stephanie Shaheen, running for Congress in New Hampshire, publicly opposed the deal her mother supported. This was not just a disagreement about policy, it was a generational divide made visible. Younger Democrats, represented by Stephanie Shaheen's position, rejected the compromise their elders embraced. This generational divide has been building for years. Older Democrats who came of age in the Reagan and Clinton eras learned to value compromise, pragmatism, and working within institutions. They believed that bipartisanship is a virtue. They believed that moderate positions appeal to the political center. They believed that incremental progress is superior to principled stands. Younger Democrats learned their politics in a different world, a world of climate catastrophe, healthcare insecurity, student debt, and stagnant wages. They did not benefit from the compromise politics of prior eras. For them, compromise has meant accepting their diminished circumstances. Compromise has meant watching opportunities and protections slip away. Compromise has meant accepting that politics is a game to be managed rather than a struggle for justice. When Schumer capitulated on healthcare, he made this generational divide explicit. He chose the old approach. He chose to accept Republicans' promises rather than hold firm on Democratic demands. He chose pragmatism over principle. And in doing so, he revealed that he represents a political generation that has become irrelevant to contemporary Democratic politics. The healthcare dimension of this crisis cannot be overstated. For over a decade, Democrats have run on healthcare. Healthcare was the issue that motivated Democratic voters in the 2018 midterms. Healthcare was central to Democratic messaging in 2024. Democrats promised voters that they would protect and expand health insurance access. Democrats promised that they would fight Republicans who wanted to take away healthcare protections. Then, when the moment came to actually fight for healthcare protections, the Democratic leadership caved. The party promised only a vote on the issue in mid-December, with no guarantee of success. Senator Tim Kaine argued that Republicans had to hold this vote to face accountability at the ballot box, but this was absurd. If Republicans lose the vote in the Senate on extending ACA credits, healthcare still expires on December 31st. There is no mechanism for Democratic voters to hold Republicans accountable if Republicans simply vote no. What the Democratic leadership actually did was surrender leverage. Democrats had leverage because the government was shut down and Republicans were being blamed. Democrats could have used that leverage to force Republicans to extend the ACA credits, but instead, Democrats gave up the leverage by ending the shutdown and then agreed to accept only a promise of a future vote. It was a negotiation between two parties with vastly different leverage, and Democrats had voluntarily given up their advantage. This was not lost on progressive Democrats. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, the largest voting bloc of House Democrats, was outraged. Representative Greg Casar, the CPA chair, accused the party of capitulating rather than compromising. The distinction matters. Compromise means both sides give something up. Capitulation means one side surrenders without receiving anything of value in return. What did Democrats get from this deal? A promise of a future vote that Republicans have every incentive to defeat. That is capitulation. How could the Democratic Party allow this to happen? How could the party's leadership lose control of its caucus so completely? And what did this mean for the party's future? The answer involves examining the mechanisms of Democratic leadership and the party's internal structure. Schumer has led Senate Democrats since 2005. He controls the campaign apparatus that funds Democratic senators' campaigns. He controls the flow of money through his leadership PAC. He controls much of the party apparatus in New York, his home state. To challenge Schumer meant risking one's own political career, yet 8 Democrats challenged him anyway. This revealed that Schumer's power structure had become brittle. His ability to maintain discipline through control of money and resources had eroded. The party's activists, the voters who knock on doors and make phone calls, had become increasingly disconnected from Schumer's brand of politics. When party activists are this disconnected from leadership, money and institutional power can only sustain authority for so long. A growing body of polling data supported this observation. According to Pew Research Center survey data conducted in September 2025, before the shutdown even began, Schumer was the least popular Democratic Senate leader on record, with his approval rating underwater even among members of his own party. This was historic. A Senate Democratic leader had never been less popular with his own party members. Schumer was not just unpopular with Republicans or independents. He was unpopular with Democrats. This polling data explained why Schumer could not hold his caucus. His authority had evaporated. His credibility with his own party members had collapsed. When a leader has lost the confidence of his own party, he can no longer enforce discipline through traditional mechanisms. The 8 Democrats who broke ranks understood that Schumer had no real power over them anymore. What occurred next demonstrated the depth of the crisis. Rather than accepting Schumer's opposition to the shutdown deal as a principled stand, progressive critics alleged that Schumer had secretly backed the deal while voting against it to save face. David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect, reported that Schumer had been in constant contact with the 8 Democrats negotiating the deal, receiving daily updates about their progress. If Schumer opposed the deal, how could he have been coordinating with the negotiators on a daily basis? Progressive critics argued that Schumer faced an impossible choice. Either he had secretly supported the deal, making his opposition vote a lie, or he could not control his caucus, which meant he was incapable of leading. Joseph Givargizi, executive director of Our Revolution, put it bluntly, if he secretly backed this surrender and voted no to save face, he's a liar. If he couldn't keep his caucus in line, he's inept. Either way, he's proven incapable of leading the fight to prevent healthcare premiums from skyrocketing for millions of Americans. The country can't afford his failed leadership any longer. This assessment captured the dilemma facing Democrats. Schumer had positioned himself as the opponent of the Republican deal while simultaneously being involved in the deal's negotiations. This positioning fooled no one. Democrats understood that Schumer either supported the deal or could not stop it. In either case, he had failed. The timing of the crisis added to its severity. Schumer turned 75 years old in November 2025. He had already been facing grumbling within the Democratic caucus about generational change, particularly after former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced her retirement from Congress. Younger Democrats and progressives had been questioning whether it was time for a new generation of leadership. In New York, where Schumer represented the state, the situation was particularly acute. The same progressive energy that had elected Zohran Mamdani as New York City's first Muslim mayor was now focused on challenging Schumer's Senate seat. Some activists were openly encouraging Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to challenge Schumer when his Senate seat came up for election in 2028. The progressive movement in Schumer's home state saw him as an obstacle rather than a leader. The broader ideological conflict within the Democratic Party also came into sharp relief through this crisis. The party contains 2 fundamentally different visions of what Democrats should be and what principles should guide their decisions. Establishment Democrats like Schumer operate from a political framework that prioritizes coalition building, electoral viability, and institutional stability. They believe the Democratic Party needs to appeal to a broad swath of American voters, including moderates and conservatives. They are willing to compromise on issues if it means winning elections. They believe that working within existing institutions is the only realistic path to change. Progressive Democrats, increasingly dominant among the party's younger members and activists, operate from a fundamentally different framework. They believe the Democratic Party should be committed to transforming American society in response to the genuine crises facing the country. They see the status quo as unacceptable. They believe compromise on fundamental issues like healthcare is a form of complicity with injustice. They are willing to accept electoral losses if it means building a party of genuine conviction and principle. Meanwhile, some Democratic moderates tried to defend the shutdown deal. They argued that the government shutdown was causing real pain to American families, federal workers missing paychecks, SNAP benefits delayed, airports experiencing disruptions. They argued that accepting the bill was necessary to relieve this immediate suffering. They argued that the promised December vote on health care provided a path forward. But this argument ignored the broader reality. Democrats had won the political battle. Trump was being blamed for the shutdown. Democrats appeared strong, and unified Republican senators were expressing frustration with Trump's approach. And yet, when the moment came to force Republicans to actually extend the ACA credits, Democrats blinked. They surrendered. They accepted promises instead of fighting for outcomes. This pattern extended beyond the shutdown to the deeper question of Democratic leadership in the Trump era. Throughout 2025, the Trump administration had been systematically using executive power to reshape government policy. Trump had attempted to defund SNAP despite court orders. Trump had attempted to rescind funds from agencies implementing policies he opposed. Trump had attempted to overturn regulations through executive action. In each case, congressional Democrats could have fought by threatening to withhold appropriations. In each case, Democrats chose not to fight. The shutdown represented a moment when Democrats had maximum leverage. The government was shut down. Republicans were being blamed. Voters were suffering. Democrats could have forced Republicans to make genuine concessions. Instead, Democrats chose to end the shutdown and accept promises. This revealed a fundamental weakness in Democratic leadership. The party had lost the will to fight for its own stated values. The party had become so focused on processes and institutions that it had forgotten about outcomes. The party was more concerned with keeping the government open than with protecting healthcare. The party was more concerned with appearing reasonable than with winning for working Americans. For the Democratic base, the voters and activists who actually power the party, this was unacceptable. They did not want a Democratic Party that compromised. They wanted a Democratic Party that fought. They wanted a Democratic Party that would match Republicans' appetite for confrontation. They wanted a Democratic Party that would put the interests of working Americans ahead of institutional stability. Schumer represented the old Democratic Party, the party that compromised, that prioritized process, that believed in working within institutions, and the Democratic base was rejecting him. Whether through a formal leadership challenge or through informal pressure to step down, the Democratic Party was moving toward new leadership. The only question was who would replace him and what kind of Democratic Party would emerge. What was certain was that the Democratic Party faced a fundamental crisis. The party had lost leadership. The party had lost unity. The party had lost the confidence of its own base, and millions of Americans were about to lose their health care protections as a result of Democratic capitulation. This was what Schumer had just done with his huge announcement, or rather his failure to announce anything. He had revealed that the Democratic Party, as currently led, was incapable of fighting for the values it claimed to represent. The Democrats were losing everything: their internal cohesion, their sense of direction, their credibility with voters, and now the health care protections that millions of Americans depended on. And the party's leadership seemed unable or unwilling to stop the collapse.